This video will explain some of the new features you will find in the latest 5.0 version of Test Pro and NSA firmware. First, we're going to start with copper testing, and this will apply to both the NSA and the Test Pro. There is a new feature in the return loss locator function. You've probably become accustomed to using return loss locator when you run a test and you have a failure that shows up in return loss. Much like our next locator, it will show you a graphical representation, a TDR trace, to help you locate where the problem exists along the cable. And in this case, we can see that this cable failed. We failed near-end crosstalk and return loss. So we're going to go take a look at the Details tab, and we're going to scroll down to our RL locator and our next locator. You're used to seeing these. If I click on next locator, we see a plot that shows us we have a pretty big spike here at the near end on crosstalk. And again, this will typically happen to your most common failure here, and this is showing me my near end has a problem, so I want to take a look at that termination. But you also get a return loss locator that you've probably used before, but we now have an enhancement to this. So not only do we get this TDR trace, a graph here that you can look and see where the spikes are, but now we have something called event table and event map. If you click on event table, you now can see still the graph up here, but now we see right here on pair 1 and 2 at 28.3 meters away, I've got a bad connector. 3 and 6, same thing, it's the other end of the cable. If we go to 4 and 5, the blue pair, I actually have a bad connector at the near end, 2 meters away. So that one at 2 meters away is my near end of the cable, and I'd want to take a look at the blue pair on this end. And then 7 and 8, we can see that both ends have an issue on the brown pair. We've got an issue 2 meters away, which is the near end, and we've got an issue at the far end of the cable. So this can help you pinpoint much more quickly the pairs that are causing the issue with return loss and allow you to locate them and start troubleshooting right away. Now the other function in here is the event map. It's going to be similar to event table, and this table and this map, if you've used our OTDR, you're used to seeing this already in an OTDR trace. So the event map will show us a linear representation, 0 at the top here being the near end. From the tester, we see we've got an issue at 2 meters. And again, we're looking at 7 and 8 right now. We've got go here, we click here, we see we've got an issue at 28 meters. Likewise, we can look at 4 and 5, and we can see there's an issue right there at 2 meters. If we go to 3 and 6, we see that issue is at the other end of the cable. It's 28 meters out. And then 1 and 2, again, roughly 28 meters out, we've got an issue there. So this RL locator event table and event map feature are new in the 5.0 firmware and will help you more quickly isolate these type of problems. To turn this feature on, we're going to go back to our home screen. I'm just going to navigate away from this. I'm not going to worry about saving this test. We'll go back to the home screen, and we would go into settings, and we'll go to the certification list, and then right down here we see locator event enable, and you can just click that and turn that on or off, and that's how you enable that locator feature. Another update in the 5.0 firmware is under the network test and cloud function. When you go into network test and cloud, now when you're connected to an Ethernet connection, we've moved a few buttons here to the top end. We always had network test, Wi-Fi, and cloud, but we've also added the blink switch port button and the switch detail button, as well as the network tools, which gets you into ping and trace route, etc. We've put those at this top level menu in the network test and cloud before you go into the network test function. So you have access to them from this level or when you're in the full network test mode. New in 5.0 regarding fiber optic functionality, we've reduced the test time for our 2-fiber auto test function in fiber certification. So you'll see a slightly faster auto test there for fiber certification. We've also added a single fiber test mode I'm going to show you here in a moment. And then I'm going to show you real quickly something that's not new to 5.0. We had this in 4.2, but I don't think very many people noticed it was there. Under fiber inspection, when you're using the microscope inserted into the USB port on the Test Pro or the NSA. We'll go take a look at a fiber connector here, and I can see this connector is fairly dirty. And what I can do is I now have a save button right here. I can click save, and it's going to save an image of that connector. Now I'm going to remove that connector from there, and if I go here, click on inspection, we'll actually see that. We see it's essentially the before picture. I'm going to go ahead and use my fiber cleaner, and I'm going to clean that connector. Now let's go back to the live view. I'll reinsert my connector, and we see it's clean. And we can look and take a look at the inspection. That was the before picture, and then we can go back to live. That's the after picture. So that is the fiber inspection portion. Now, the other thing that we've got, I mentioned, is the single fiber test mode. This is based on customer request. Again, this is how we improve our products, is by listening to what customers ask us for. So with the single fiber test, we can see I'm connected with one fiber here. This is going to be for the Test Pro, where you use your Test Pro remote as a remote for a single fiber test. You're going to use the light source from your Test Pro on the remote end, and you're going to use a single test reference cord to go from that transmit port of your remote into the receive port on your main unit, because now your main unit is going to be your power meter in this instance. And what we're going to do is on our remote end, I'm going to go into tools, and I'm going to go into light source and power meter here, and on my remote I'm going to click on light source, and I'm going to select automatic. Now, because this is my main, it won't let me select automatic, but when you click this on your remote unit, you will have an option here that will say automatic. Now on my main unit, I'm going to do that right now while we've got this. I'm going to go into fiber certification on my remote, and I'm going to set that right now for automatic from that same drop down menu, and it'll auto shift between 850 and 1300. Now on power meter on my main end, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to click on auto. So now the remote unit is acting as a light source for both 850 and 1300, so it's automatically doing both wavelengths. My main end is the power meter, and it's automatically set for both wavelengths. We see here I've got an absolute power reading, negative 20.68, negative 21.46, fairly typical on multi-mode. And then I see loss here, but the loss is, we haven't set a reference or anything yet. So what I would want to do is go in and go set my loss budget. So I can go into loss budget, and I'm going to go to standard limit, and I'm going to use generic. Now there is a TRC. If I'm just testing my TRC, I can look at that as well. So right here, maybe the fiber I'm going to test is going to be 1.5. So we can go ahead and change these both to 1.5 for 1.5 dB of loss. And then we'll go ahead and save that. And so we're set up for testing with a 1.5. Now that TRC reference you saw there, that is also something new, and that is in both certification and in this single fiber mode. You go into loss budget, and you can choose that TRC mode, and when you notice it defaulted to 0.1, that is the test reference cord for multi-mode. That is what you're allowed to have as far as loss goes, and we'll have a separate video on that. So what I'm going to do now is I want to do a set reference. I'll go right here, I'm going to hit set reference, and now that we've set our reference, we can go ahead and connect an additional reference cord. So we used a single jumper reference method between the main and the remote, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and connect my test reference cord, my second test reference cord. And because I've disconnected, we're getting a notification here that I don't have a connection, but I'm going to go ahead and clean my test reference cord here. Now remember, when you're doing this in the field, you really want to inspect and clean everything. If you inspect it and it's not dirty, don't worry about cleaning it. I need to connect the other end of my second reference cord here. We'll clean that and connect it. So now I have connected the second reference cord to the receive port of my main unit, and then I've used a coupler to couple the two reference cords together. So now we see we've got loss here 0.01, 0.03. We're in pretty decent shape there. So in this case, what I want to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I can click that loss budget and go to that standard limit button and tell it I want to do the test reference cord. Click save, and then right here we can see that we're well within that limit. I'm going to just go ahead and click save. And now we're ready to go ahead and test our fiber. So I'm going to go back in and change that loss budget. We'll go back into our generic loss budget, and again it's going to default to 3. So I'm going to want to change that to 1.5 for both wavelengths. And this is just straight loss budget. This isn't taking into account anything but the total loss that we're looking at, and that's the number that I want for this fiber. So now what I'm going to do, I have got my reference cord taken care of. I know that it doesn't have excessive loss. So now what I'll do is I'm going to connect to my fiber under test. So I've got my main unit at one end of my fiber to be tested. I'm going to connect my remote unit to the other end of the fiber to be tested. And again, I get this message because I've disconnected the units. And once we connect, we get a reading, and we see that we've got loss here 0.15, 0.19, well within my 1.5 that I specified. And this is a piece of fiber. It's about 100 feet long. So I'm going to go ahead and click save. And we see that is A060. My reference cord was that A059. So I'm going to click save. Now I'll go back. So we're going to go back to our home screen for a moment. You may have noticed when I saved these results, we just allowed it to save automatically from our default list. And you can do a save as. There was another button there called save as, and you're used to doing this if you've been using Test Pro for a while. So I could have clicked the save as button when I did my test reference cord and just called it a TRC instead of using one of the labels in the label scheme. That way I immediately identify it as my test reference cord. What I'm going to do, because I forgot to do that, I'm going to go back to the home screen, go into data, and I'm going to go find that result. It was A059, and the test I ran was A060, so we go to A059. We're just going to click to select it. We're going to edit it, and then I am going to rename this. I'm just going to delete that name, and I am going to call it TRC for test reference cord. We'll click OK, and now I can see that I've renamed that. So that's how it will show up in my test reports as well. So I did want to point that out. And the test reference cord functionality, that limit is also available when you're doing dual fiber certification versus the single fiber test. And selection is very similar to what we just did. Instead of using a certification limit, you'll just go in and you'll select the loss budget, and in there you will see the new TRC, and it will give you 0.1 as your allowable loss for multi-mode and 0.2 as your allowable loss for single mode test reference cords. So let's take a look at something else that's new in fiber. I'm going to go back into fiber certification here. As you can see, I've got two fibers hooked up this time. I'm going to go into project. I can go from this screen here. I can go to project and go and edit my test profile, or I can do this from the home screen. You're accustomed to doing this either way. You can go to that project button in the lower left of the home screen. We're going to edit our test profile, and right now we've got the latest TIA multi-mode reference grade standard selected here. I'm going to go in here, and the first thing I want to do is show you how to find that test reference cord limit I mentioned. You just click on loss budget, you click on standard limit, then you'll see generic loss budget, or you'll see the TRC multi-mode. So if I select that TRC multi-mode, that again will give me that 0.1, 0.1. I'm just going to back out of that. We've got that multi-mode reference grade in there. But what I do want to show you, and you may have just noticed that, in addition to the certification and loss budget, we now have an application limit. So we can click on application, and we click on the standard limit button, and you'll see several different application limits in here for fiber optics. So for instance, if I check the 1 gig base LX, is the L is long wavelength, so we see 1300 nanometers, the longer of these two wavelengths, and it gives us a 2.35 loss allowance at that wavelength and a length limit of 550. If we were to change that to the SX version of 1 gig, that looks at the short wavelength, the 850 nanometer wavelength, and that is our allowable loss and our length limit. So this would allow you to do a loss based on that, and then we could run a test with that loss limit selected. And when our test completes, we see our length, we see our delay, we see our margin at 850. There won't be a margin at 1300 because remember, this is that SX limit, so we're only looking at the loss limit for 850. If we go into loss, we can see at 850, here's our losses, and then we see our limits, 3.56, which is from that limit we selected. We can look at 1300 nanometers. We actually measure the loss, but there's no limit to compare it to. And like all of our fiber tests, we also show all of the network limits. So even though we tested this for that 1000 base, the LX, or SX rather, that 1 gig SX limit, we also compare it to all the other limits. Just like we do every fiber certification test that we run, we give you the information over here for network limits. So we tell you what else you can run on this fiber. That's included whether you're using a TIA, an ISO limit, or one of these new application limits. And then we can just save that, that fiber test just like we do any other fiber test. And that's the new application limit. One last change in 5.0 regarding fiber is in the OTDR function. So when you're using our OTDR adapter, there is an improvement in here. I'm going to go into OTDR and show you this. I've already got my test set up. I've got all my limits set up under settings, etc. Got my pulse width and max length set. I'm just going to go ahead and run a test. And what I want to point out is this test in progress notification window only remains there for about a second or so, and then up top here you're going to see this live trace, and up top you see this button where you can actually stop the test if you want before it's finished. But you'll notice that this trace, as that test is running, will actually change. It will keep building as it collects data, and it will refine the trace. So if you start a test and you see on the trace, oh, I've got a broken fiber at 500 feet, you can just stop the test. You don't have to wait for it to finish. You can click that little button. Now you see that button disappeared after the test was complete. And then we just save the test just like we normally do. Next, we'll talk about some of the changes in the Test Data Pro results management software. So I won't go through all of the features in here. We'll have a full updated video on Test Data Pro. And if you're used to using Test Data Pro already, this will be very similar to what you've become accustomed to in the previous version. It just has a different appearance and a cleaner, crisper appearance, if you will. But some of the things I'd like to point out here, right now I've got one project open, but you notice this looks like a tab. I can click this plus button and I can open another test here, another test project. So now I can have multiple projects open simultaneously. So this facilitates, if you're bringing in a bunch of projects, you've saved a couple projects and you want to compile them all into one, you can much more readily do a copy and paste. You could select tests from this one and do a right click and a copy, and then go to the other tab and you right click and paste. So that facilitates your copy and paste functionality much more smoothly. The other thing that I'll point out, we've always had the recertification up top here where we can click the recertification button, and you can select, whoops, I have to select a test result. So we're going to go select this Cat6a permanent link right here, and if we click recertification, if you needed to modify the NVP value, you can do that in the recertification. But what we want to look at is limit, and you get a whole drop down, a wide list here of TIA and ISO, all these various limits. In case you weren't aware, if you accidentally test it in Cat 6 and you meant to do it in Cat 6a for the limit, you can change that in here. But also, if you tested it in Cat 3 instead of Cat 6a for some strange reason, you can even recertify from Cat 3 all the way up to Cat 6a, and you can recertify from Cat 6a to the Cat 6a plus parameters with the DC resistance, unbalance, TCL, EL, TL, those extra limits that are optional. With some other testers, you have to actually go back out and rerun a test to go to those optional parameters. With Test Pro, we include those all the time, so they're there. But what I wanted to show you is not just with this recertification button now, but if I right-click this test result, there is recertification right there. So it's just a shortcut that you've now got to get right to that recertification. Same process. So that's the recertification process, and I'll just go ahead and recertify that real quick just so you can see that in this video. So it is a Cat 6a permanent link, and we're going to try to do it to a Cat 6a permanent link plus. We'll see if that cable was good enough. So here's Cat 6a permanent link plus, so that adds our DC resistance unbalance parameters, and it successfully recertified it. So that was A008. So if I go down to the bottom of my list, I will see an A008RC. Actually, let me make this easier. I'll sort this by label. There we go. There's my A008RC. So I've recertified that. So that one now shows plus. And again, originally I recertified it as Cat 6a, but we already include that information in the test results, so it's easy to recertify it in the software. Other things to point out: if we have a large project, and I'll go try to find a large project here to open up and give us multiple results, so I can show you the analytics button. So I'm going to go open up this project right here, and however many projects I have open here, it's going to take all my copper and fiber tests when I do analytics, and it'll pull everything in from all the projects. So up top now you see we have this analytics button. I'm going to click on analytics, and I get this window that opens up, and I'm going to click on copper, and the window always opens up in my other monitor. So here is our analytics. So in analytics, I can see that I've got several results here, and I see a range, insertion loss margin, return loss margin, next margin. So here we see we have some that are below my zero margin here. So if we look over here on the right, I've got several tests here that fall into that negative margin. So here's -9 to -8. There's 3 results. If I click on that line, here are those 3 test results. It pulls up, tells me what project they're in, and I can click on this little test details button. This is the same button we use in Test Data Pro if you want to look at test details. I'm going to click on the test details button, and it'll open up, of course, in my other monitor. So I'll bring that over, and here are the test details that I just clicked on. So we can go in and drill down into this test, and we can look at all of our issues. We can even look at our locators, our next locator, to see which end of the cable the worst crosstalk is on. So that you can drill down in these analytics. So the analytics allow you to look at a wide range of tests over time and look for trends. So maybe you're seeing, maybe you've changed to a new cable and you're starting to see some losses, and you can kind of look at all the ones that were lower than you think they should be, and see, is there a common denominator? Is it the same cable, the same connector we've been using on these jobs? You can also add filters. There's a filter button in here, so you can filter it by the operator, whoever was running the tester. You can filter it by the project or the type of test profile. So we click on project, and then here's our various projects that are part of this analytics. So we can select that and then filter these results. by that information as well. So that's the analytics. Let's take a look at fiber real quick in the analytics. And again, this is going to open up in another window. So here you've got wavelength 1, wavelength 2. So of course, if it's multi-mode, it's 850, 1300. Single mode, 1310, 5050. But let's say same thing. You've got your losses. If you've got some that are failed or passed, just make this a little bigger so we can see it. Let's say we want to look at these 13 results right here that are in that 0 to 1. These all pass, but the 0 to 1, maybe that's a little tighter than I'd like it. So I'm going to highlight that, and then again I can go look at any one of these, and we can go click on any one of these fibers in the detail tab, just like we do on the copper, and it opens up that window. And we can see the test details. So we see all the configuration, the main unit, remote unit information, reference power, all that. Then we can see the test results in here as well, including the compliant networks. So same thing, you can use this to analyze trends. You can use filters, obviously by operator. You can filter by project. Same thing that you can do in copper. So very similar functionality. Also, there is a View PDF button. You can also save configuration. So if you change any of the filters, you can save that as a regular configuration you want to use. But this View PDF button will allow us to generate a PDF, and I'm just going to give it, I'll just let it default to my analytics, and I'll put it on my desktop, and then we will see that PDF open up, and of course it opens in another window, so I will drag it over and we'll see our analytics. Let me zoom that out a little bit. So this would be your analytics report, and we just did this for fiber. Worst margin hologram. Here's some that histogram, not hologram. Worst margin histogram, your length. So we see all this information in your PDF, and that is the analytics. And point out a couple of other things in the settings right here. We have in the company information, now you can put in company name, you can put in contact information. We've always had the select company logo, but if you put in contact information in here, whatever you type in here is going to show up in the lower right hand corner of your test reports, your PDF reports. So that can help you personalize that. Same thing with selecting the company logo. If you click on that, it'll open up a place where you can select the logo, and then you can go ahead and choose I'm just going to choose the old Tech Talk with Steve logo here, and we're going to select that as our company logo and click OK. So now when I print a PDF report, if I go in and we take one of our test results that we let's do the one that we recertified, so I can show you what that looks like. We get over to that project. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to click on this little PDF icon to pull up a single page report of just this test, and I will bring this over to the right screen here, and when it opens up, we now see that that logo I selected is now in the upper left instead of having the AEM logo like we typically see on the test reports like this one. So just by changing that, you can change your company logo, and then if you ever wanted to revert it back to to get rid of that logo and default it back to AEM, you could just hit the default settings, and that'll move everything back to factory defaults. So that is some of the new functionality that we've got in the new Test Data Pro. Additionally, there's some improvements in the speed of importing large numbers of test results. So you will see a big change there. If you've ever imported, say several thousand test results, you'll notice a huge change when you're importing that many test results at once. It is much speedier than it was in the past. So that's a great improvement in Test Data Pro. So this concludes what's new in 5.0 for the Test Pro firmware and for Test Data Pro version 5.0. If you have any questions, you can always, in your Test Data Pro, click on Contact, and you'll find out how to reach us. You've got our phone number in there, and you've got an email, customercare@aem-test.com. That is our technical support number and technical support email, so you can reach us at any time with questions. Thank you for your time.